In many Arduino projects, you might come to a point where you like to use some sensors, displays, or other quote-unquote intelligent components. Chances are somebody already created a library, so people don't have to write the same code over and over again. In this example, I'll use an OLED display, which will be driven by an I2C bus. So initially, you might use the Arduino's built-in wire library and implement all I2C display commands by hand. But instead, you could also use some display library that already exists. In this example, I'll use one from Adafruit. This allows you to easily draw simple shapes like lines, text, or single pixels without ever having to deal with I2C. Additionally, you can of course also use external files that you have laying around. Sometimes you just get code from a friend or from GitHub that you might want to use in your project. You can simply place them within the lib folder and then just import them in your code. With additional libraries, you can wrap your head around your actual project and not on how to, for example, drive an I2C display. So let's find out how we can use external libraries in PlatformIO. To begin, I already set up a new project, created a main.c++ file and inserted the basic boilerplate code. To drive our display, we need two libraries. One is called SSD1306. This handles all the I2C display communication. On top of that, we'll use Adafruit's GFX library, and this is the one that enables us to draw stuff like, for example, lines or text. So, how do we start? The SSD1306 library obviously needs I2C or SPI, and that's why we need to include those libraries as well. Like in the official Arduino IDE, they are already built in and do not need any further installation. But what about Adafruit's libraries? If we simply include them, we obviously get an error. We have to somehow download and put them into our project. Luckily, PlatformIO comes with a library manager. This gives you access to all libraries that were submitted to the PlatformIO ecosystem. You'll find it by opening PlatformIO's homepage through the menu item. After doing a search for Adafruit GFX, we can install it with a single click. PlatformIO will ask us if we want to install it locally for our current project or globally for every project on our machine. I personally always install locally, so every project has its own dependencies. This might be the better solution because at some point you might need two different versions of a library for two separate projects. After installing locally, we also need to search and install the SSD1306 library. With that done, we can go back to our project. If we now save the file, we still get an error, but no worries. This is just because the code linter did not recognize our previous installation. To give him a refresh, go to your menu and hit Rebuild Project Index. This may take a couple of seconds, but we can now save the file again and even compile our project without any errors. Great, since we now have all our libraries installed, we can give it a quick test. First, we need a new display object that we will use to execute drawing commands. Notice that the code completion feature now also knows about every class, function and constant of our newly installed libraries. This is such a huge advantage over the standard editor and will save you a lot of time while writing code. But let's continue. Just like a regular UART stream, we first call a begin function to initialize stuff. Here we specify the I2C address of our display so the library can start communicating. Don't get confused with the first parameter. I'll skip the explanation for that because a complete guide to Adafruit's library would be beyond the scope of this tutorial. However, to test if everything is working, let's just draw a simple line. After initializing, the library will draw Adafruit's logo onto the display. But that's not what we want here, so we'll first clear the display. Next, we draw our line by calling drawLine. For that we have to provide a starting and ending point as well as a stroke color. Then we simply issue the display command, which will then physically send everything to our display. Great, after uploading we do see that line show up. So with just a couple of lines we successfully use our display. Think about how much work that would have been without using external libraries. The library manager makes things so easy. With the built-in search you can find all sorts of helpful things. I totally recommend you searching around there when starting a new project. Chances are you'll find a couple of time-saving libraries within just a few minutes. You'll also find interesting information about one specific library by selecting it from the search. Very often they already provide example sketches so you can start right away. But enough about the library manager. What if you like to use a library from GitHub that not yet exists within PlatformIO? Or you like to reuse some source code from a past project? For that we have the lib folder. This is the appropriate spot to put your private libraries. Keep in mind that you should organize your libraries within subfolders. In my case, I'd like to use a lin library from a previous project, so I'll create its own subfolder by dragging in my source code. If you use C++ classes, keep in mind that you should name the folder exactly like the main class file name of your library. PlatformIO will automatically find all corresponding source files within that subfolder. After that, you can simply import your library into your main code and use it for your project, and of course enjoy code completion. So that's it for today. You now know how to find and use libraries from the library manager. You can now also reuse code from other sources like GitHub or simply some classes you already made for previous projects. I really hope you liked this video. Happy hacking, and I'll see you next time.